of October 2018, the Finance Minister, the Honorable Colm Imbert, presented the country's 2018-2019 budget theme, Turnaround. Welcome to Conversations with Aegis. Today, our discussion is centered around the 2019 national budget. Our panel consists of our staff at Aegis.
Thank you very much, Shalisa. 2018-2019 budget. Budget title is Turnaround. So let's start very briefly with your views. Brent, what are your views on the budget, overall views on the budget?
I would say the budget itself was deliberate, focused, intentional in terms of closing the fiscal gap, which is currently at just over $4 billion. So in essence, from the previous budget of 2018, it was somewhere in the vicinity of over $6 billion. So it has dropped just over $2 billion. So I think the government has focused on reducing expenditure, which is currently just above $51 billion, and income just above $47 billion. So there's the gap of 4.2, I believe, billion. So in essence, I think it's a deliberate attempt to get a balanced budget by the year 2021 as predicted by the IMF.
Leanne, was it a budget that you expected?
I believe that there were a couple items that generally the public was looking for that did not materialize. There were certain aspects that that we expected. For example, the increase in the gas price is something, because we speak about subsidies so much in this country and we look for it at every budget. Generally, echoing Brent's sentiment, it was that we have been preparing, this being the government's fourth budget presentation. I think that the earlier budgets were more restrictive. It was more harsh. So then coming down to this one, I think that it was not, there were no elements that were super shocking.
And Andre, your initial thoughts on the budget. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, this being my first budget experience in Trinidad, I think I might have expected more as it pertains to the diversification of the non-energy sector. A lot of stimulus to bring in new business movement from the SMEs, especially maybe in the free trade zone area. As it pertains to the fuel supreme increase, for me, from a small islander perspective, it's not anything significant, because we are dealing with prices of approximately 100 TT per gallon. Yeah. So, and we deal with changes in fuel prices every month, fluctuation up and down. So I actually did expect a bit more, especially from diesel as well. But I understand the stance that the government took in trying not to give a full-on shock right away. But I see increase having to come across very soon. So it's just a matter of time. My interest has been how the society has taken to the items on the budget, and thus far it's primarily been fuel price increase and petrol trend. But sentiments shared with Brent, they have done their best to try and reduce from the last few periods. So it's understandable.
Almano, from your perspective, did you observe any shockers? Were there any shockers for you in this budget presentation?
Actually, no. I listened to it and I read it a couple of times, and there was nothing that actually shocked me to a certain extent. No.
What about you, Tennille? Any disappointments in the budget?
I wouldn't say, no, I wouldn't say there was any disappointments. I think I would echo what the panel is saying, that it was a focus on less on fiscal measures and more on social development, which I think are good measures. There were some aspects of the budget that were expected, I believe. It was suggested in previous budgets that, of course, the removal of the subsidy is something that they would have implemented. All right. So, of course, with the increase in dollar, it is something that it is anticipated. But of course, looking at how it's going to affect the citizens and their measures to try to survive, more or less, is something that everybody will have to look at how they're going to cope. But nothing to really shock.
As Julianne and you all alluded to, in terms of the fuel subsidy, it's not a shocker. From the very first budget in 2015, there would have been removals, and over the last 4 budgets from both super and diesel. And just to put it in a little small perspective as we continue the discussion, for the last 5 years, this has been the 4th increase in super gas, 84% increase within the last 5 years. And in terms of diesel, although there wasn't an increase this year, last year there was a huge increase. And for the last 5 years, a 127% increase in diesel, which is as a result of the reduction of the subsidy. Generally speaking, Brent, how do you think that this will impact the overall population?
It will have an impact on certain segments of the economy and certain segments of the traveling public, especially those taxi drivers, those maxis that still use super. However, most of the government vehicles still use diesel, and most of it also converted to CNG. I think this is a drive that is deliberate to actually switch users from super to CNG, because they are on the drive of bringing in more hybrids. You're getting at a lower cost. So in terms of dealing with that, I think they want us to actually move away from super, well, as much as we can, to the CNG formula, if I should use that word. So in terms of dealing with it at this point in time, it will be impactful to certain segments of the population who uses private maxis and private taxis on their daily travels. So yes, there will be some impact, but those who use the public transportation, there should not be.
Speaking of public transportation, subsequent to the budget, the Energy Chamber would have indicated, as they have indicated before, that they found that the fuel subsidy was a poor way to distribute wealth, and they really had suggested that a better way would have been through public transportation. They would have indicated, for example, for the last 16 years, over 29 billion would have been spent on this fuel subsidy and subsidizing public transportation. Do you think, Andre, do you agree with the Energy Chamber's thoughts on that it's better to subsidize the public transportation versus the fuel subsidy?
At the end of the day, from the private transportation, this would have an adverse effect on the pockets of society. Yeah, increase to come most likely with taxi increase. So it would have most likely been better for a reduction from the subsidy given to the transport sector. Traveling is a big thing in Trinidad, and it, at the end of the day, affects the Trinidadian population's pockets drastically. Yeah, takes away from productivity as it pertains to the job and all of that. So I think this should have been something that would be considered as an option.
Now, a lot of public transportation presently is provided by what we refer to as PH. Leanne, do you think with this increase, it will affect the transportation prices in some of the rural areas?
Well, a subsidy on public and private transport will make that business area more competitive. Private, or PH as we call it locally, it's not regulated. It means that they make their own rules and they work by it. Whether or not it affects them, I will say no, because in themselves they know that they would have a market. For example, when a private age taxi goes home, probably let's say about 7 o'clock, the PH drivers work, and they at that time will be able to charge whatever fee because they know the public wants to get to their destination. So where an age driver will charge, let's say $3 for a lift, the PH driver will be able to charge at max $6 for the same job based on demand. So I think that removing or finding a way to regulate PH drivers in a more systematic manner will, in tandem with age drivers, will work better. But if you leave them to do their own work, then it will not impact.
As Leanne rightly indicated, PH as we know it is illegal. But the reality also is they still provide a service, although an illegal service, to a lot of the rural communities, and by extension to a lot of communities after a certain hour. And Manu, do you foresee an increase in taxi fares to some of these areas as a result of the reduction of the subsidy?
Well, I would think so, yes. Reason being is that most of these taxis, they would use super as their main fuel source. Most of these vehicles don't carry diesel. Most of them use super. So I would see that, yes. But I would also like to touch on something that the UNIPED chairman, Dr. Ali, would have said, right? He said that 60% of the gas sales would come from super. So that would tell me that right off the bat, 60% of the population, 60% of the community would be immediately affected by this. So I would automatically think that it's going to have a big impact. But yes, I would see a lot of taxis raising their fares, which I already heard of.
You already heard of?
Yes, correct.
And Janine, any final thoughts on the removal of the subsidy?
I mean, just to echo Manu's comments, there would be an increase. I'm foreseeing that there is a demand for this service, all right, especially in these rural areas. There are a lot of taxis, H cars that will not go into those areas, and there is a demand. And so because there is a demand, consumers will have to pay whatever increase that these PH drivers will charge. All right. So I mean, removing the subsidy is something that they expected, and the consumers will, of course, or the passengers themselves would have to then, of course, fall in line with whatever costs that would be charged on them because of the need to be serviced for those areas.
Let's move on to some of the social security measures that were advocated and stated in the budget. Brent, we would have seen that there's an increase in the food cards. There would have been an increase in some of the public assistance grants and pension, joint pension. What are your views on that?
I think it's a good move by the government because majority of these, if I should use the word stakeholder, they are the ones that are most vulnerable within the society. They are the ones that are low income earners, so they are the ones that need that specific help, that specific increase. So it's important for us as citizens to understand that. So in terms of redistribution of our wealth, it must go to the most vulnerable, the low income earners, and at least the pensioners. Because at the end of the day, this is the income that they have. This is what put bread and butter on their table. So at the end of the day, and they also have children as well. So increasing increasing the social security net, I see no problems in doing that because it's redistributing to the correct sector of the country.
Leanne, in previous budgets, we have seen transfers and subsidies have been sometimes 50% and more. We are seeing now that the government of the day is trying to systematically reduce some of these subsidies, as we have seen with the reduction in the fuel. Now we have seen to balance it off, this increase in terms of in the social security aspect,
Right.
social services. What are your views on the removal on one side, but the increase in transfer and subsidies on the other side?
Well, that is exactly the point of the minister in removing the subsidy. He said it clearly. He said by removing the subsidy that the country has enjoyed, it will provide additional revenue that can be refocused to different areas of the country. So I expect now that we will have better roads, social services will benefit, the education, schools and etc. will benefit from the subsidy. Just to go away from the subsidy a little, he also expressed in his conversation about the food cards that they removed a significant amount of persons who would have not otherwise been applicable for the food card, thereby raising an additional $150 million. So I think in their strategies to raise money, areas like social services and agriculture and all of these would see an additional injection from the overall revenue budget.
And Andre, what are your thoughts on that?
I share sentiments with Brent in that redistribution has hit the areas or the persons that will feel the brunt of any significant changes in the structure. I also see that from the point of view of the budget seeking to reduce on its expenditure, there really needs to be more that can be done to the non-energy sector, especially for the small to medium businesses. I think if something more was done or given in that area to entice especially the youth in developing or seeking their own entrepreneurial lives, this could have gone much further, not disputing that the persons who got it need it. From a small island perspective, we don't have a populace that can sustain, for example, a free trade zone, things like this. The fact that this has been enacted in Trinidad for many years, I don't see that it's being flourished, or the best is it's being used efficiently. So I think that is something that we need to take into consideration. It will bring in a lot of foreign direct investment because youth like to partner with youth. So ideas focused on increasing this area would reap benefits for the entire nation, I think.
As Andre would have indicated, diversification of the economy. We have seen that we have moved from oil to gas, and from ever since there has been discussion about diversification. Almano, measures would have been indicated in terms of diversity in the economy, in terms of agriculture, in terms of maritime services, in terms of financial services, in terms of the creative sector. What are your views on the measures that were indicated by the minister?
Alright, so it has certain initiatives that they put forward, such as the dry dry dock project, the Sandals project for Tobago and whatnot. All those are great diversification measures. I fully agree with it, but I would like to touch a little bit on what Andre had said, and I fully endorse that because yes, you're diversifying the Trinidad economy for ways of revenue, but the small to medium businesses, right? I would have really liked to see that some measures were put in there, some programs, some initiatives were put in there to help those businesses grow. So if the small and medium businesses grow, it could be a way of revenue for the government as well. Instead of just cutting expenditures, it could be a way of increasing revenue.
If I could just cut across that point, I think that the areas that the government has targeted for some of these projects, I know they said Labrie and Moruga and different rural districts where I know that they have probably low high unemployment rates. I think that this is where the small and medium-sized companies will now, in those rural areas, will get the boost that they also need by injecting investments in that area, building employment through the projects, the initial phase, as well as the operation of the facilities, the aluminum plant that is in Labrie right now, the surrounding areas, the small businessman, the food stall, the doublesman, all of these people benefit from the plant that is being built there. When it's operating, the flow through business that will continue was all with the aim for not only building the aluminum plant, but with a view that the small and medium businesses surrounding that will also benefit. So I think that whilst the government did not provide incentives or direct allowances for small and medium-sized businesses, I think that strategically placing these initiatives in rural areas basically provided a platform for growth for the small and medium-sized businesses.
And I'd like to just add to that, especially with the Sandals project in Tobago. When Sandals came into Grenada, that did significantly well for the small to medium enterprises, especially the tour guides. Yeah, a lot of tour guides, even to this day, and this is what maybe Sandals came in around 2013. So to this day, we have new small entities developing as early as late last year to provide a service to the guests that come in. It has done a lot for airlift to Grenada. Sandals go all out with their marketing. They don't depend on a country from that regard. Yeah, so it will bring Tobago to the forefront again. So I'm looking forward to see a lot for the small and medium enterprises from that end.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Andre is saying. We have to understand this term diversification. There are many facets to what we understand, because everyone will know or have a different opinion on what diversification means. It really have to start with a mindset of really having the will to move away from energy and energy related products, commodities. So it's a specific will that from my opinion, I did not gather from the budget, because it's very we still predicating on a lot on the energy sector to bring in revenue for us. I really would have liked to see some more incentives, especially as my colleagues has mentioned, the smaller micro enterprises or the medium-sized businesses, because they are the real drivers of the economy. They are the ones that employ the rural communities. They will the cottage industries, the restaurants, the transportation, the distribution sector. So in terms of dealing with it, we must link the big projects to the smaller ones. How do this big project, for example, the DME plant in Labrie, how would this affect the surrounding area, Labre, Point Fortin, Rosilac, as the case may be? How would this impact, this one big project, impact on the small man, I should say, in terms of his business needs, his entrepreneurial skills, his reliability on that plant to bring in some income? So in terms of dealing with that, I think we have to make it a one step further in terms of, yes, a big project is fine, but at the same time, the entrepreneurial spirit must be transferred. Retrain these individuals that probably will be out of a job into certain sectors. So kind of corralling the those that will soon be unemployed or those who are unemployed, try to re-engineer and redevelop, retrain these individuals in order for us to actually have niches within the entire country, and especially Tobago with the Sandals project. It's all good and well to say a mega project, but a mega project takes a long time in order to see returns on it. So in essence, we need to really have the will to actually do what we have to do, and I think the government has that will in terms of redirecting what it is that is necessary. It's just I needed to see a bit more of diversification in the budget itself. So I did not see that at this point.
And speaking of library, the TMD plant is just one big project, and the minister and the prime minister before would have indicated the new dry docking facility.
Yes, well.
So we anticipate for the next, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of construction activities taking place in library. Leanne, do you foresee library with all these plans and construction activities being the next Point Lisas and contributing significantly to the national coffers?
It has the potential to do so. However, I'm just looking at the area in itself. There's so much infrastructure in terms of roads and other social improvements that need to be done for it to be a point resource. I think that it could be an industrial park or in itself or something, but to be the next point resource, I can't see it right now. Maybe the ministries, they have that vision and that is the way that they want to go, but I personally cannot see that right now. It would be nice.
Yeah, Andrew?
Just one other thing I'd like to bring to the table. From my point of view, especially for the infrastructure, building of roads and all that, and in time we will see persons losing their jobs from the private sector, and it's not really a creation, it's just a movement of the populace from private sector to these projects, right? And at the end of the day, the private sector is still the ones that will be feeling the brunt of the paying for all of these infrastructures. Yeah? So my point comes back to small and medium enterprises. Yeah? If you give them that incentive to hold a level of responsibility for the development of the nation, I think they will surprise the government in doing just that. Yeah? It will give the government, as Amanda said, more revenues to focus on these infrastructures at the end of the day. And holistically, I think that is the best way forward for diversification.
And just to add to that point of the Labre dry docking shipbuilding company, I know an agreement was already signed, memorandum of understanding with China Harboring Company. And what is good about this agreement is that that company has 30% stake in that facility. What does that mean? Is that they have a vested interest for this to be successful. So that in itself proves that this will have a positive effect in terms of transshipment hub to the Americas from South and Central America, because there are approximately, if memory serves me right, 31,000 voyages passing through 25 nautical miles of Tobago. So in terms of dealing with that, we have a wealth of capacity that we need to build in Trinidad to become the transshipment hub of Central and South America.
Sure.
In addition to that, we have one of the largest energy plants in Trinidad and Tobago. It's no longer PowerJet. It's now TGU, Trinidad Generation Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of Labre, in my perspective, could be bigger than the Point Lisas industrial estate, given that ship repair, shipyard, is something that is very rare on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. So in terms of dealing with that, there's many potential, there's much potential in the southwestern peninsula of Trinidad. Once we know how to do it efficiently, once we do it accountably, once we do it transparently, I think we will be on the right road. Because at the end of the day, this is one of the mega projects that is of diversification drive.
Let's move on to another aspect of the budget. Tax collection. We all know that's the main way a government gets their revenue, via tax collection. And the Minister of Finance would have announced that the property tax, which has been on the plate for quite some time, is basically coming into effect 2019. Almano, do you have any views on the various measures of tax collection that were indicated by the Minister? Whether it's the property tax or whether it's the increase in fines. We see some increase in fines from an environmental perspective for bushfires. We see increase in fines in terms of non-compliance with the Income Tax Act. What are your views on these measures?
Well, my views are the same that I would have said earlier. These are all small measures to increase taxes. I don't see it having a big effect, or as per se that these would have a significant amount of revenue for the government.
I believe it is a good initiative to deter individuals from not making those, for creating such penalties to ensure that they adhere to the law. All right, especially increasing the fines for bushfires. I think that is something that for agricultural purposes is something that is a good method, as well as the litter. I mean, there's one other thing aspect of it too. How do you actually enforce the law?
Yes.
And that is something that I need to see a method to improve on, actually getting the individuals or yes, in the act. Are you going to have increased litter wardens? What is the status on that? Is it going to? Are you going to improve the resources for that? Are you going to have them stationed? These are the methods that I would like to see to being able to actually enforce those fines.
And speaking of enforcement, Leanne, the Minister would have also indicated that a lot of self-employed, in terms of whether it's attorneys, doctors, accountants, have basically been escaping enforcement. What are your views on enforcement and the new measures
I
suggested?
know that the professional public is probably now quaking in their boots. It has been a topic of discussion for some time that the doctors and lawyers, accountants have been less than forthcoming with their tax payments. The only way for us to have enforcement lies with what he would have mentioned, which is most salient for collection, which is the resourcing of the revenue authority when it comes on stream. He says they need to hire 150 persons. You cannot collect without persons to collect. Mm-hmm. So it means to say that when we do that, then we will be able to target the persons. And we're not only talking about professionals. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding the doublesman, whether he should be paying tax. And whereas it may not seem to persons as a way to earn revenue for the country, I think what a lot of corporations and large companies say is that because so many smaller companies or professionals get away with not paying taxes, the burden is really placed on those persons who actually pay the taxes. So rather than having to face a 30% corporation tax or 25% individual tax rate, if the burden on revenue is spread by all who are liable to the government, then we probably could settle on a nice 20% once collectability is within the 90% range.
Now, the biggest slice of the budget cake went to education and training, over $7.39 billion. Do you think this was a refreshing step, Mano?
I fully agree with the Ministry of Education having the biggest slice of the pie, right? But I believe that it was just an allocation of money and no real future, no real long-term thoughts on how would this gonna affect education in general. So it's just, alright, here's the money, but no, what are you guys gonna do with the money? So I came up with some statistics here. In 2018, 2,597 students for SE scored under 30%, right? For CXC, 1,486 students did not pass any subjects. There was only a 60% pass rate, that where students pass enough subjects to attain a full certificate. So that's telling me 40% of them did not pass all their subjects. Right? Now, where are we going to use the money to do? What are we going to use the money to do? That is my question. Because we keep pumping in money into the Ministry of Education, but the results are not showing for it. I believe we need to have more social programs going forward, because there are a lot of children now that have a disadvantage because of the areas that they're growing up, their homes and whatnot. So that is really affecting the schooling, and it's sad to see that now it's no longer, alright, what are the after school programs? Is it close to my home? It is now about, is this school safe? Is the school safe for my child to go to? And that is how parents choose their school now. I could be wrong.
I see you nodding, Andrew. What are your thoughts on education?
I totally agree with what Amano says. And I would like to even go further in looking at what it is the country needs long term. Yeah? Do they need more lawyers, more accountants, more? Where do you want to see your society moving to? Where do you want to see developed? Yeah? Vocational training is key. Yeah? It's only now Grenada has started to focus on this area. And it does a lot for giving options to a child. Yeah? Rather than being told, oh, you have to be an accountant, you have to be a doctor, because you're looking at the big revenue brackets. That's not always the case. Technical skill is very important for having a holistic future. Yeah? And in some areas, especially where we're going into technological advances, I think one thing about the Caribbean region is we think sometimes that these things won't fall on us or it won't affect us. It will in the long term, because when you go outside there, and if you're looking at holistically revenue earners, the segments of us that go outside, yeah, we send back, yeah. So if you're preparing from the vocational point of view for persons to go outside and develop these skills even more, start at home, go outside and perfect it. It will be a big return in the future.
And speaking of crime, 6.1 approximately would have been allocated billion, that is, to national security grant. And measures were indicated in terms of improving technology at the police stations. What are your views on the improvement of technology?
I think there's no choice in it. Technology must play a big deterrent to crime in terms of, and there's all the models throughout the world where you can kind of customize to what we have. The laptops in the motor vehicles, the detection from a national operating center. It must be integrated in a certain way so that it will be ABC. So at the end of the day, crime is one of the deterrents as well for business and investors looking into Trinidad to invest. So it's one of the areas in our competitive index that was very high on not doing business with us. So it's even more crucial when it comes to business and investors in Trinidad and Tobago about the crime situation. In addition to that, we just inaugurated our Commissioner of Police. I think from what I'm seeing thus far, he's on the ground, he's listening. From the PR, the relation side of things, I'm seeing advertisements how a police officer should introduce themselves. I did not know that either. But it's giving you education, the public's knowledge about how police officers should conduct themselves with the authority that they have. So I think it's a lot of work to be done. I mean, the murder rate is very high still. Petty crimes are very high still. So those are the areas. I think detection rate needs to go up quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Okay, if I could just add, in its simplest term, education and security, $7 and $6 billion. I want to see return for money. I want to see schools opening on time with everything fixed. I want to see a lower crime rate. I want to see justice. I want to see higher pass rates, and that is it for the layman out there. We just want to be able to see our money being spent well.
Especially for the primary education sector. I would like to see better staffing of more of those social workers that are there to provide counseling and guidance for individuals at that level, because it's easier to fix at that level than to create individuals that you can't penetrate, and the system or society then owes them something. All right, so I would like to see a better injection into that level of education and assistance.
One other thing before we wrap up that we would have seen in the budget is that the threshold for stamp duty for first-time owners has increased from 850 to 1.5 million. Tennille, what are your views on that increase? And how would that impact you or your family or first-time home owners?
I think it's a good initiative to allow better purchasing power for individuals, middle-class individuals. By increasing it to 1.5, that saves families close to 25,000 to 30,000 in this stamp duty. So I think it's a really good initiative to allow individuals to purchase homes that are deemed unattainable for couples in the middle class income bracket.
And your final thoughts, Leanne. Do you agree with the Minister of Finance that this budget there will be genuine economic growth?
I think that the measures that they have put in place, systematic, I think that is strategic, and I think that with follow through, I know that they have a vision to 2030, but with a plan and even inter-party transitioning, if it is to happen, that we will look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. So yes.
What are your final thoughts on the budget, Andre?
Well, I'm already looking forward to the next one. I think they've done the best that they could with their target of reducing. All right. So now it's to see how the populace will take that and run with it. But my concern is if you put into security and education, as Leanne says, make it work. Let there be returns. Let's see.
I agree. There must
Brent,
be some.
the minister would have indicated in his post-budget review yesterday, no new taxes for the next 2 years. What are your final thoughts overall on the budget?
With regard to no new tax, well, I think the middle class will have a sigh of relief, because that's what's happening right now, where the middle class is burdening with all the taxes to propel the country forward. I think they should increase the tax bracket the tax net itself, to include those private sector individuals, those consultants, those contractors that are eluding or avoiding to pay taxes. But overall, I think it's a budget of focus when it comes to lowering the fiscal deficit. However, I would have liked to hear a bit more, because it's in the interest of diversifying from the energy sector to non-energy sector, because there's too much still dependency on oil and gas. I should have heard a bit more about the National Statistical Office, because data in this country is very difficult to get. I should have heard more of the Revenue Authority. They only mentioned that legislation is coming and will be operational in 2020, I believe. Also, the procurement regulator, I should have heard a bit more on that as well, because it's a big part of being transparent and being accountable. With regard to the property tax, a little more education and a little more knowledge for the public is required for the property tax, because I myself as a homeowner needs to understand how much do I pay in property tax at this point in time, because they're seeking to implement it early next year, if I believe. And also the NIF bonds, it's arguably noted that this is not revenue. So in terms of dealing with that, it's a liability to the country. So I am waiting on, as the debate on the budget goes on, I am listening and waiting on the answers from the various ministers, opposition and government alike, to hear exactly what are their thoughts within their specific ministries and responsibilities.
And Tennille, what are your final thoughts on the budget?
I do look forward to seeing the measures that they have put in place to be followed through. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the enforcement of these laws. 2019 is a promising year, and I'm hoping to see greater opportunities for the individuals that may be affected in a negative or positive way, open doors and opportunities for them to remain afloat, basically, in this economy.
Almano, your final thoughts?
In theory, I believe it was a well thought out budget. No, I do agree with all my colleagues. It is a well thought out, but I would like to see, as they said, implementation. I would like to see it follow through. I would like to touch on something Brent had said, which is that they did intentionally look for ways to close the gap between revenue and expenditure, but I would like to go back to the last point that, there was more of reducing expenditure, but not more of increasing revenue. I would just like to touch back on one point. Now I know, as Leanne said, they would have placed certain project at certain strategic points, right? Which would definitely help the areas, and I fully endorse that. I agree with it. But certain areas will be helped, but certain areas won't, because there are a lot of areas, particularly in the east, in the main road there. I'm seeing a lot of malls with a lot of missing stores now. There's no one in there. So while certain areas will be growing, and I am happy for that, I agree with that, it needs to be across the board. Small to medium businesses need to be grown across the board. There need to be incentives for those. So yes, I do agree with the budget. I would like to see it follow through, but I believe it's more a budget of allocation and less of, okay, what are we going to do with it? The nitty gritty of it. What are we going to do with the money in the Ministry of Education and whatnot? So yeah.
Well, colleagues, that's it. Let me say thanks to each and every one of you all for being a part of our first on the couch post-budget review. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you for viewing Conversation with Aegis. I am Shalisa Gosain. Good day.